Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Glad to be with you. And I thought I would just sit behind the barn today. I know it's a little messy back here with some supplies, materials that we're going to use hopefully to work in the barn with. But it's nice and shady here because it's hot outside. And I wanted to tell you a story of how God really protected me. So, I was about 22 years old, and I'd already had my son, Jason. He was about 2 years old. But I was a single mom, and I would go to my parents' place. They owned a little country store called the Dora store, and I would watch the store for them so they could get out and do whatever. And they gave me a little bit of money, not too much, but a little bit, and I got to stay there, and they'd fill up my tank with gas, which was a huge help. And so that's where Jason and I went a lot. Well, I want to tell you a story about one time when God really protected me and Jason. So Mom and Dad were getting ready to leave. They were going to be gone overnight, which was fine. I was used to that. It was no problem. And the living quarters were in back of this little store. And to get between the living quarters, there was a door with a window on it, and we had a little curtain on it so you couldn't see into the living quarters from the store. And the store had, of course, a front door with a big old window in it. And it had a lock, but down lower in the door, nearer the ground, there was another slide bolt to help keep people out if they decided to come in. And we really hadn't had any problems. But my mom, she was a worrier, and she said to me when they were getting ready to leave, "Here, Maria, take my pistol." My mom always kept a pistol under the counter. And I said, "Mom, I don't want a pistol. I'm not going to shoot anybody. If anybody comes and they really want something, they can take it." Well, my dad was kind of funny, and he said, "What about using Daddy's double-barrel shotgun?" Now, Daddy was who he called Daddy was my grandfather, Grant Weathers. And so that sounded interesting. Mind you, I had never shot any type of gun in my whole life. So he took me back into the bedroom and he pulled out his dad's old double-barrel shotgun. It was so heavy, unbelievably heavy. And he showed me where the safety was on it, and he showed me how to load the shotgun shells. And it had 2 triggers. I thought that was interesting. So he said, "Now if anything happens, Maria, just point that rifle straight up, or better yet, straight down. Don't ever shoot it out through the store. You'll knock everything off the shelves." Well, shotguns have lots of little BBs in them, and I suppose what he really meant was I'd begin hitting a lot of things as those BBs dispersed. But I was sure I wouldn't have to use it, so it was no problem. I also want to say, this was in the days when you only had corded phones. So the phone was attached to a wall or on a counter, and you had to be by there. Now, sometimes you had long extensions. Mom and Dad didn't have long extensions on those, so you had to stand or pull up a chair to sit. So that night, I got Jason in bed, and he was going through a really scary time, and I'm not sure what causes it. He was having night terrors. So sometimes he would have some sort of dream and he would just wake up screaming, like unconsolable. So I was very careful not to wake him up and trigger one of those things. So I was in the back of the house. I suppose I'd been maybe watching TV. And it was dark in the house. Of course, it was dark in the store. But there was a big light out in front that lit up the whole front. And I heard somebody drive up. Now, nobody should have been driving up at that time of night. I don't know, it could have been midnight or 1 o'clock. I'd been closed for hours. And so I went to the door very carefully and I parted the little curtain enough that I could get my eye out there to see what was going on. Well, there was a man out there. He'd parked in front by the gas pumps. And he was looking in the store and looking all throughout it. I don't know if he was looking to see if there was a person there or just basically casing the place. And then I saw him reach out his hand and he turned the doorknob. Well, I was young, I had good eyesight. I could see that doorknob turning from inside, but it was locked. I knew this was a bad thing and I did not have time to get to the telephone. I also couldn't grab Jason, which is what I really wanted to do, and just take off out the back door and head to my cousin's, which was maybe 1/8 of a mile away at the most, to get help. So I was stuck there by myself. So I ran and I got that double-barrel shotgun and I loaded both barrels. And I went to the door and I stood watching this man. So after he'd look for a while, then he would go ahead and he would walk to the gas pump and he'd look up one way of the road and up another. And then when he was satisfied with whatever he thought he was seeing, he would come back to the door and he would try that door handle again. He was really setting me on total edge. Well, this felt like this went on for hours, and I don't really know how long it went on, but at least 10 or 15 minutes. And finally he decided to get back into his rig and he drove off. I was so relieved. So I went into the little bathroom. There was a tiny little bathroom and it had what I thought was a knot hole in the floor. As long as I could remember when my grandma had it, it had that knot hole. And I went in there and I was shaking. I mean, I was really, really scared. And so I went to unload that gun. And I knew that I would have to have the safety on to do that. But when I looked at the little safety latch, it didn't say on or off. So I had no idea. But being wise in all my 22 years of wisdom, I knew how to test it. Oh, first let me tell you, my dad had told me it had a hair trigger. Cool. I'd heard that saying in a lot of westerns. Didn't really know what it meant, but I'd heard it a lot. So I decided I would just wiggle the trigger. And if it didn't have any wiggle, then I knew that it was on safety and I could unload the shells. That's when I learned what a hair trigger was. I barely wiggled that thing at all, and I had it pointing towards the ground, but it wasn't on the ground. It was in front of my foot, maybe 10 or 14 inches above the floor, and boom, and it kicked, and I was just shocked. So I looked down. There was a hole right in the floor. How was I ever going to explain this? and all over my legs was black powder. And on the walls of this teeny little bathroom, up almost knee high, was black powder. I could have been pointing that gun any direction. I could have been pointing it towards the next room where Jason was sleeping. But because I didn't have enough knowledge of that weapon. So I began scrubbing my legs and those walls and the floor, and I scrubbed off every bit of black plastic or black powder. And I decided the best thing to say was nothing. Well, I put the gun on safety and unloaded the other shell. And I said nothing. I said nothing at all. My folks came home, I said nothing. I was 30 and I said nothing. And about 35 years, when I was about 35 years old, I finally decided I would tell my dad what had happened. And you know what my dad said? He said, I thought there was another hole in that floor. Well, you know what I think? I think there was another knothead like me who had shot a shotgun shell through that floor at some time. I don't know, but that's my guess. But I appreciated so much that the Lord saved me in so many ways. He saved me from that person breaking in. He saved me from pointing that gun towards where Jason was sleeping. He saved my foot so I didn't blow it off. He's a good God. Well, I just thought you might enjoy hearing that story that was so scary to me, but shows God's great provision. So it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I want to pray blessings on you and yours in your house. The wind's picking up. Can you hear it? Out of your house, in the day and in the night, and whatever you do, keep dreaming. Bye-bye.